Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and being here with us today. We have a very exciting panel for you. My name is LaShawn Roy, and I am your moderator for today. I am an alumni of Ignite, and I currently serve as the voter registration manager for JOLT, and we are a statewide nonprofit organization that works on increasing the civic participation of Latinx folks all across our great state of Texas. So the first thing I'm going to ask our panelists to do today is just go through and go ahead and tell us their names and also what they're running for. So Hosanna, why don't we start with you?
Yes. Hi, my name is Hosanna Yemaru, and I am running for Dallas City Council in District 11.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sadaf Haq. I actually just ran for Frisco City Council back in November, so I'm glad to be back part of Ignite and speaking today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Naima Silver Matos. I am currently running for District Leader of Washington Heights in New York City.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. And I want to give a big thank you to our panelists for sharing their time with us today and hopping on here to share a little bit about your experiences. So what we really want to do here for our audience today is give them a really lively discussion on the realness of running a grassroots campaign as a woman of color. So the first thing I want to start out with asking our panelists today is if you will tell us a little bit about your journey or your why. How did you get to this point of running or deciding to run, and just what that looked like? And so, Naima, why don't we start with you? Sorry.
I was just about to take notes. So let me just write down the question. Why journey to running for office?
Yes.
Okay, so here's what I will do. I had actually written an op-ed which Ignite National posted on their website. And instead of running around for 3 minutes trying to get a great answer for this question, I'm just going to go ahead and read that because it shares exactly why I'm doing this, why I'm still doing this. And it gives a little bit of context. I gave some context as to why I'm doing this, okay? So I started off by saying that it takes courage to speak up against complacency and injustice while others remain silent, but that's what leadership is. And that's a quote from Rosabeth Cantor. And so if you're a woman that is interested in running for office or getting more involved in politics for the first time, the first thing that I would like you to know is that patience is a necessity. So in terms of my journey, it has forced me and required me to be patient. And that's something that I was not many years ago. I had a very idealistic perspective on things, and then I've realized how things really work, right? So it takes time to learn. You have to learn how things are interconnected. You have to see things on different levels. Who are the different stakeholders? What happened in the past before you even existed? Who did what, when? How did that impact the community, or what impact did it have in general? And then there's a personal process of growth and internal growth. And to me, that's very important as a leader, that we take time to understand ourselves and also to understand the terrain that we're looking to represent. And so the next part of my journey has been what they call gaining thick skin. I didn't understand it until things happened, and my skin just started getting thicker. And so I would recap that as make sure that your heart is strong, because the majority of people that you encounter are not what they appear to be, especially in this realm. And so I said that these people, they're not kitty cats, they're not cute puppy dogs, they're not dolphins, cute little sheep, cool little iguanas, or those that know about Vampirina. Those are not what you're going to encounter in the field. What you're going to encounter are bloodthirsty felines and canines and sharks and vampires and some crocodiles and some rats and some pigs. And I share that because most people don't tell you about that part when it comes to running for office. And in my opinion, what makes politics dirty is not politics itself. It's the type of people that are involved and the types of things that they do. And so knowing this, I have to remind myself why it's important to stay in this field. And I've tried to walk away from politics many times, but it finds me. You know, some people say I didn't choose thug life chose me, but I didn't choose politics. Politics chose me. So why do I keep going in this field? And here's my answer. I guess here's my why. Because I genuinely believe that politics, when it is done the right way, it can save people's lives. Politics and diplomacy, when it's done the right way, it can save people's lives. I have seen it firsthand. And we need more of the right people involved, making decisions, doing the work, taking up space, deciding on public policy. Because the majority of the people involved right now are the wrong type of people that are doing it for the wrong reasons. And they're all about the game of optics. They're not about saving lives and protecting people and equity. They're not about any of that. And so I cannot sit back and let other people determine my people's future or my family's future or my future without giving an input, without putting up resistance or trying to make a difference. Because you can't talk about it or complain or any of that if you're not taking action, you know? So at least I have to try. And I think that enough is enough of the wrong kind of people doing the wrong things in positions of power. And that's why I'm running.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Sadaf, why don't we go to you?
Gosh, Naima hit so much truth to everything. I ran for Frisco City Council, and my campaign unofficially started back in 2019, in the fall of 2019. And a lot of the reason, for my why was because I was so civically engaged. And I loved serving my local Frisco, Texas community, which at the time was a little shy of 200,000 people. And when I was approached to consider running for office, I, initially would just shrug it off and be like, there's no way that I can step into this realm and run for office. And, mother of three, and I have so much other things that are going on. However, the more people that I spoke to, my mentors, my family and everything, they were like, if anyone can do it, you can do it. And one of the things that my husband said to me, he's like, if anyone has a thick skin, you have the thick skin. And that was one of the things that I didn't realize about myself. And I also didn't understand why I would need that thick skin. And so as, the campaign started to kick off and officially became, and the thing is, as women, we stop ourselves from taking these risks because we put so many other, we prioritize so much more. And instead of something such as politics, or could be our career or other important aspects of our lives that can impact so many others, which is so important. As a woman, we have a totally different mindset. And so it's that, that's number one reason. So when I finally realized, what am I waiting for? And this was when one of my friends said, what are you waiting for? Because women typically just keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And as the campaign started kicking off and really starting to get into the thick of it, COVID happened. It was such an anomaly of a year. The pandemic happened. Everything started to become so politicized. Along with the divisiveness, the political divisiveness. My local elections have never taken place in a general election, let alone a presidential, let alone one of the most politically divisive times in our nation. And me being a woman of color, a different faith who wears it on her head. But when you talk to me, I will never, I will never let on to, my faith driving whatever policies or whatever that I'm speaking of. However, because I wear it on my head and because of just the imagery that is portrayed. And I feel like as women, no matter our faith, race, creed, we are easily put into these boxes. And when we speak, that is when people are immediately, the box moves and they cannot handle it. So as a woman, there were a lot of things that I experienced aside from my faith, aside from so much more. The way I was spoken to by certain people, just, it was people, especially men, felt it very easy to speak ill of me. And I really wish, it wasn't during the time of COVID, so I could literally sit down with people the way that I was pre-COVID and allow them the opportunity for not only for them to get to know me, but for me to get to know them and find that common ground. So that was important. But I say that all to say, I mean, it was a very, very heavy year, but I don't regret it one single bit. Even if I knew what was going to happen with the election moving into November, I still would have taken on this challenge. And I say that because it is society that puts these limitations upon us as women, or as women of color, or as candidates. And that's why so many of us don't run up and step up to run for office. It's the system. The system is created that way. And so the more of us need to step out and run for office and make those differences, because like Naima said, absolutely, it's not politics. It is the game that is played, and it is so extremely dirty. But I think if you're mentally prepared for that, this is advice that someone had given to me, that two things: one, in politics, you don't take anything personal. And number two, they will always, always find something, because that is just part of the game. If you expect that you will run for office and nothing will happen and you'll be untouched, and you won't. I mean, I dealt with lies. I dealt with betrayal. And people that asked me to run for office betrayed me and ended up supporting my opponent, because once the election got moved, they figured that would serve them better. I mean, just so many eye-opening moments, but it has made me such a better person. Has it made me a little cynical? Yes, of course, but I think that is just a protective mechanism that we need as women in politics. And like Naima said, I tried to be a little recluse after the election, but now I'm getting phone calls. Hey, who are you supporting in the May election? And I'm like, okay, all right, I got to get back into this. All right, let's talk about this. And so politics will find you. But it's a beautiful thing, if we can come out to be successful from it. Policies that impact people, we need good people to have good policies. And so I'm firm on that belief. But, for those of you that are running right now, for those of you that are considering running, I mean, I am supportive of you 100%. And so I can't wait to hear all of your stories and, wish everyone the best. But that's kind of my why.
Love it. We need good people to have good policies. I'm gonna like write that down. I love that. All right, Hosanna.
Yeah. So, I mean, Naima and Sadaf said so many amazing things. It's a hard act to follow. But so for me personally, I'm running for Dallas City Council in Dallas, Texas, and I'm not originally from Dallas. I'm from Ethiopia, and I moved here when I was about 11 years old. So I grew up in Ethiopia, I moved here, and then did the rest of my life here. And I grew up really relying on my city to survive, right? I didn't really understand at the moment that I was relying on my city to survive, but I used our DARTs and our DART trains to get to school and to work and then back home. I relied on our libraries for access to Wi-Fi. I remember if it was after hours, I would just drive up and sit in my car and be like, all right, gotta siphon off some library Wi-Fi today. I would, use our Office of Community Care that helped us pay our utility bills when we really needed it. And these were life-saving, necessary services for me growing up. And I realized, once you start paying attention, that these are the services that are always first on the chopping block. These are the services that are always the most negotiable, right? Like, these are the things that we need to talk about if they're necessary or not. And you realize that the reason that these conversations are happening is because the people that have had the opportunity and the privilege and the ability to be elected officials, to be the people who make decisions for us day in and day out, are the people who don't use these services. They're not people who understand why these services are important. Working families, working people, poor people, just regular Dallasites and regular folks don't think about running for office. And they don't do it not because they don't have the need to serve their community, but because they don't work 9 to 5s. They don't work 40 hours a week. They're working 80 to 90 hours a week. They're raising families. They are trying to make ends meet. And yet, these are the people that we need to be representatives because they're the ones who understand how our world functions. They're the people who understand how our cities function. So I just remember very clearly early on, I believe it was maybe in March or so, we got the first round of CARES Act money from the federal government, and that came to our city. There was about $300 million that Dallas got specifically. And I was helping a neighbor of mine. I'm a renter. I was helping a neighbor of mine fill out the rental aid application. And the way that the city had done this was, gave out a ton of money to all these nonprofits, and they said, you got it, figure this out, you do this. And each nonprofit had a different application process. Each of them had a different qualification. Sometimes you'd apply for one, and that makes it to where you can't apply for another. If you're somebody who doesn't have access to broadband internet, I mean, man, you're just kind of out of luck, right? If you don't speak the language and you need someone to interpret for you, that's tough. And so I was helping a neighbor fill this out. It took us forever to figure out how to do it, and then we actually did it. Applied for rental aid, and he didn't receive any aid. And I thought, okay, maybe that was just how it went. And we turned on the city council meeting later that day, and they were having a conversation about how there was still $200 million left over in CARES Act money. From the $300 million, $200 million still left over in CARES Act money. And the conversation was, God, I guess there's just not that much need in our neighborhoods. And I thought to myself, there is so much need. We just don't have the infrastructure. There is so much need. We just don't have the people in those communities actually doing this work. So I sat there and I thought, well, I know what my neighborhoods want. I know what my neighbors need. I know what my family needs. I know I'm smart enough to do this. I know I'm capable enough of doing this. I know that I have the time and the privilege to be able to do this. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And that was really the thought process at the time, was like, let's do it and see what happens. And just like they mentioned, it was one of those things where you think to yourself, okay, we're going to go in and we're going to change the world. And very quickly you realize that people are very resistant to change. They're very resistant to this idea that things can only happen a certain way. They can only happen at a certain time, that you have some dues that you got to pay, that you have some things you have to do. You got to be groomed. You got to do this. You got to do that. And if you don't do those things and you're jumping the line, then this is not a place that you should be. This is not a district that you can win. These are not ideas that people actually want. And we say that in an election where only 5% of people decide what happens for the rest of our city. And we accept that to be okay, right? And the people that are deciding these things, they're not working families, right? They're not Black women. They're not Black and brown neighborhoods. They're people who have the ability to and the capacity to go out and vote in every single election. So in our campaign, we decided that what we were going to do is we're going to empower people. We're going to empower people to say, this is your city, and this is your budget, and this is your taxpayer money that is being used for things that do not benefit you. And how are we going to change that? How are we going to build community? How are we going to build neighborhood power to be able to combat not only apathy, but bad faith actors, right? People who are out here deciding for us how we're going to live our lives. And it's very empowering for me, myself, when I go out and I talk to people who tell you that no one's ever knocked on my door for a municipal race before. No one's ever called me about a municipal race before. I didn't even know that my city council could help me with, my car's getting towed every other week. I didn't know someone could help me with my trash collection. I didn't know that my alleyways could actually be taken care of. That's not something that anyone's ever talked to me about. And it's in those moments that you realize that your experiences as women, as working people, as folks who are just regular folks trying to make it through day by day, that your experiences can speak to people who are in need of that. So I guess one piece of advice that I would give people is that you know what you want and you know what your community needs. And by the virtue of living in your neighborhood, by the virtue of working in your neighborhood, by virtue of loving your city and loving your country, you are qualified to do what to represent your people. And I wish that was something that a lot of people had told me too, right? Because just like Sadaf mentioned, women are told again and again, this is not your time. This is not something you can do. You are not capable. You're not smart enough. And the truth is, we are. And the more women and more young women and more Black and brown women that get into these positions, the more we're able to see that we have the power to do what we know is good for our communities. So that's my why, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you all so much. Each of you have such powerful stories, that I'm sure resonates with members of our audience today. So thank you for that. And in answering that question, each of your answers really did a perfect segue for me to get into our next question that I'm going to ask you all, which is basically, can y'all expand a little bit on how your age, your gender, obviously being women, has been used against you as a reason that you're not qualified enough to run for office? And in particular, especially if you fit some of those groups, like if you identify as a millennial or a Gen Z. I know oftentimes we hear, oh, you're too young, y'all don't care, yada, yada. I'm sure everyone on the panel, as well as our audience, has essentially heard it all when it comes to that. But just to remind our panelists again of the question. The question here is, can you elaborate a little bit more on how your age, gender, and even some of those other identifications such as millennial or Gen Z has been used against you as a reason why you're not qualified enough to run for office? And so I know Naima, I'm gonna give her a second because I know she's taking notes over there. So I'm gonna start off with Sadaf this time, if you wanna open it up for us and answer that.
Yes, absolutely. So for me, it was really unique because I literally am on the cusp of being a millennial and a Gen Xer, literally. So when I had just turned 42, but when I started my campaign, I was 40. And so that number, all of a sudden, qualified me to be like, okay, she's mature. And and I can speak to this because for the longest time, no one really knew my age until I filed for office. But there was that kind of, I could sense this sigh of relief, like, okay, all right, she's at a good age. But I know the men and women that were running in the other race with me, who were millennial and who were there was one millennial and one Gen Z, and not so much the millennial, but the Gen Z. He was constantly berated because of his age, and I have seen that not only here local to Frisco, Texas, but even, well, actually, no, it is Frisco, Texas, because I was literally watching another forum last week, and in the other race that's happening for May, again, you have another youth. But this time it was kind of turned around. He was critiquing the incumbent for his age and being like, we need fresh, younger ideas. And so, so I felt like, and even, during my time, the older and the younger, so age was a very big factor for some reason. That was the one thing that I got lucky in, is that because I had hit that 40 mark, it was all of a sudden the stamp of approval. Okay, she's good to go. So that was my experience with age. As far as women are concerned, it was more passive aggressive. Because I think this day and age, people don't want to critique you for your gender, and so was that was more under wraps and more passive aggressive.
Thank you for that. And Naima, you look like you're ready to go, so I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. So I'm still, as she was speaking, as Sadaf was speaking, images and memories kept flowing, coming forward. I know that prior to running for office, ultimately what I've realized, so I qualify as a millennial, even though I was not consulted on that term, and what our values are. I've never done a survey as a millennial, so I don't know who they're interviewing for this data. But I just noticed that there's a lack of respect towards young people and young leaders. So in my community, for example, I have over 10 years of just doing sheer grassroots work without putting a penny in my pocket for the work that I've been doing. So for example, I've started, led, and continue leading affinity groups for older women, particularly immigrant women that after, they have their children, they kind of let themselves go. And you could see the depression sometimes just by the way that they look. And so it's like, all right, let's create this social club, this affinity group, and let's focus on wellness programming, educational programming, financial literacy programming. And that's for older women. I also started a leadership program for girls, been running it for the past 7 years, literacy programs, youth mentoring programs, helping neighbors with a whole bunch of different things. So the point is that, I've been doing the work, but because I'm young, they don't want to respect me. They don't want to put respect on my name. And I remember one role in particular. I was helping to establish a voter registration organization, nonpartisan, and I was responsible for over 20,000 voter registration forms in a nonpartisan manner. And they called it a young buck flexing, just because I was excellent, professional, efficient, on point, and I didn't take any shit from my from the folks that I was working with that happened to be male, macho, and did not want to open space for a younger woman that was not submissive. So that has been my experience in a very macho. I come from a Dominican background, so it's very machista, and I don't tolerate it. So that has been my experience, but we still move forward.
We absolutely do. And Hosanna, you want to go next?
Yeah. So my staff and my friends hate it when I say this word, but I guess I'm a zillennial. I fit somewhere in between millennial and Gen Z. And I'm by far the youngest person in my race, and if elected, I would be the youngest council member in Dallas at 23. And so it makes sense. The thing is that I've been doing political organizing, and it makes sense to me why people are so kind of in the beginning, oh, hold up, I don't know about that, like I don't know, like I have shoes older than you, like why would I elect you, right? And that's okay. I think it's okay, and I think it's okay to be a little put off in the beginning. But I think what I've learned is that regular people, voters, I'm not even talking about other electeds, I'm not talking about people with some sort of agenda, right? Just regular voters, I think, are very drawn to the idea of honesty. They're very drawn to the idea of looking at someone and saying, you're not doing this because you're going to gain something from it. You're not doing this because, I don't know, you want to be, I can't imagine seeing someone running for city council, especially, and being like, I mean, this is for clout, but people can really tell where your heart is in many different ways. So I think that something that I've learned along the way is that people will put up barriers because they think you're too young, you're too inexperienced, or whatever it is. And as soon as you share yourself and you share who you are and you share why you're doing this, a lot of people are more than happy to say, you know what, I'm with that. I know what this is about. I know that someone would not put themselves in this position where they would get attacked for being so young, for being too Black, for being too inexperienced, for being too whatever, if they didn't have the heart to do it. And so that's the first thing that I would say. The second is that, I think that we spend so much time saying we need to activate young voters. We spend so much time saying we need to get young people off the benches into the voting booth. And anytime that young people say, okay, we're going to do that, we're just like, hold up. That's too much. You're doing too much, right? Anytime women do that, we're just like, you're doing too much. Every time Black women do that, we tell them, you're doing too much, right? So I think it's really important that if we're going to say all of these things, if we want young people to get activated, if we want communities of color to be empowered, then we need to step back and say, okay, we're going to support you when you actually do something like this. So that's been my experience. And I think highlighting to people that I thought your values were that you wanted young people to be involved. I thought your values was that you wanted women to be involved. A lot of people will take back and say, okay, you're right. I do want young people to be involved. Let me just let it happen. So all that to say, you will get attacked for your age if you are super young. It will happen. People will call you inexperienced. But it's really more about what you do with it and how you take that and say, okay, that's fine. You know, I'm still going to run. I'm still going to do what I need to do. I'm still going to fight for my community because I know that I'm not going to get what I don't fight for. And that's what it's really about. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, ladies. And as a follow-up question to that, would each of you just kind of touch base on what kind of tips or advice you would give to young women or young people in general on how they can overcome the way people use their identities or may use their identities against them when they're wanting to run or running for something? And Hosanna, I think that you already touched on this a little bit, so I want to start with you and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that I would say is, and I'm, you know, the first thing that I would say is know what you're running for, right? And I don't mean as like, what is the position that you're running for, but why are you doing this? And hammer that into anyone that would listen. Just like, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm doing this. Because I think what happens a lot is that, especially with young women, people feel like they can co-opt who you are. People feel like they can co-opt what your message is. People think that they can decide for you why you're doing this. And it's really important that you are able to set the message about who you are and stick to it. The other thing that I would say is that build your team and build your community, because it really does take a village to run for office. It really does. It takes people who know you and who love you and who trust you, even when you feel like you don't know yourself and you don't trust yourself and you don't love yourself. And that is really a very important part of this. And having that support system, I think, really does carry you quite a bit. And I think the last piece of advice that I would have is that at the end of the day, win or lose or draw, I suppose, in some instances, you always get to know that you did this for a reason, and you always know that you fought for what you believed in, and you tried your best, right? I always say, for example, that I'm broke. Like, I am broke. I cannot be perpetually running for office, right? Like, so I'm going to do this once and I'm going to do it right. And it's really important that when you decide to do this, that you do it right. Like, you give it all you got, you go 110%. You put all of yourself into it. And then by the time you're done, whether you win or you lose, you know that you did everything that you could. And that is more important than anything else that could happen during your race. So that would be my advice.
Thank you so much. And Sadaf, do you have any advice that you would give to folks that are planning to run or currently running in regards to, you know, folks using their identities against them?
So I touched upon this earlier, is that people will use whatever they can to come at you. So don't let any of that fluff be deterrence for you. You know, and I'm sure Hosanna and Naima and anybody else watching, you know in your heart when it's time for you. And you know when there's a calling for you. So do it, irregardless of, listen, everyone's in it to win it. I did not win my race, but when I reflect back and I look forward to all the opportunities that have come out because of me running for office, it's there's so many wins in that process. So don't not do it out of fear because someone will come at you for your age or for your gender or for whatever else that you yourself feel insecure about or society is making you feel insecure about. And so all of that, you will overcome that because you are being chosen to run and to take this path. And so it'll happen. Everything ends up falling in place. And so that would be my advice.
Love it. So well said. And then Naima, what advice would you give?
Sure. Let me see if I can keep it short and sweet because I see there's 2 questions from the audience and our time is coming up. I guess what I would say is flip it around and just turn it into a strength. So this is this is specifically about our identities being used against us, right?
Correct.
So yeah, I would just say flip it and use it to your strength. Your identity allows you, hopefully, to know the group that you represent, but also don't stay within the box or boxes of what your identity is supposedly, and make sure that you get to know all the different constituents in your community. So for example, for me, I have immigrant background, Dominican, Spanish speaking, first generation, all of that. But my community, though it's predominantly immigrant, Dominican, all of that, there's also a population of Caucasian voters, population of African American voters, a small population of other voters. So it's important to understand the demographics of your community. So use what you have and who you are to your strengths. Make sure that you understand the needs of what you represent. And then also make sure you understand the needs of the different constituents in your community. If people want to use it against you, it's only going to expose who they are, right? And you need to love yourself and appreciate yourself, and you are who you are. So that's it.
Thank you so much, ladies, for answering that. And yes, we do have a couple of questions from our audience. So thank you, audience members, for sending in those questions. We appreciate it. And so the first question from our audience is, how did you assemble your team and what had to be in place to make you decide to run? And so, Hosanna, I know you're in the middle of your campaign right now, so I'd like to go ahead and start with you to help give us more insight on how you assembled your team and then what all had to be in place to make you decide to run.
Yeah, so I was really, really lucky because I come from a political organizing background. So a lot of, actually, my team is very young and they're all people that I trained, which is very exciting for me because I'm a control freak. And so knowing that it's people that I trained, I'm just like, okay, there's just a bunch of little Hosannas running around doing, all the little things. And so I feel good about it. So my team is made up of folks that I trained on other campaigns. I have some folks from Colin's campaign, from Candace Valenzuela's campaign. And that's how I was able to assemble my team. Outside of that, I have my friends who I am so grateful for, who decided to just become basically like informal team members. And they just spend so much time on my campaign doing that work. So that's how I was able to assemble my team, which might be a little bit different for Naima and Sadaf. So I'm sure they'll have better things to say. And then what had to be in place to make me decide to run? For me, it was just like, we had an open seat, first of all. So it was like, we had to do something. Somebody had to run here because we knew that. And the second part was, I knew that I said this earlier, but I think it's so important for people to repeat this to themselves over and over again in your affirmations of being like, I am smart enough to do this. I am capable enough of doing this. I am experienced enough to do this. I got thick skin. I can do this, right? Like I can fight back, right? Makes me think of that TikTok where it's like, talk to me, I'll fight back. Because I'm just like, I will fight back. And so for me, it was just like, I had to think to myself over and over and over again for like 5 months. Oh, I can do this. 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 And then one day I woke up and I was like, oh, I'm doing this. And then it happened. So I'll let Sadaf and Naima answer that because I think they'll probably have better insight on how to assemble a team.
Great. Sadaf, we'll go to you next, and then Naima will go to you.
Oh my gosh, Hosanna, that moment when I woke up and I was like, I turned to my husband, I was like, I'm doing this. Like, this is happening. Like that moment happens when you wake up in the morning. Gosh, gosh, LaShawn, I was so engaged in what Hosanna was saying. What were the questions again? I apologize.
No, no worries. I know she blew it out of the water. So the questions were, how did you assemble your team? And then what had to be in place to make you decide to run?
Yes. Okay. How did I assemble my team? So when word got out, the whispers got out that I was considering running for office, people just kind of came to me. And I am so grateful because I think about if, and again, that's because I was so involved civically in the city. So I had those friendships and those connections and that network, but I don't know what I would have done if people hadn't come to me. I don't know. I don't know if I would have, I honestly don't know. So if for me, it just happened. And I'm so grateful for that because those are the people that I leaned on. I know that they're also part of the process. There were people that I thought would be there for me that were not. And the minute the election was over, they wanted to come back into my life, which is also very interesting. So those moments happened as well. I lost some friends over it, not because of anything else, but because I guess they just I don't know. Whether we drifted apart or whatever the case was, I'm a very forgiving person, but I think just a part of me that has a hard time forgetting in those times of need when I needed people that I typically would have leaned on. Why? So that was kind of my whole team assembly answer. Why? What was it? Why I ran for office?
Yeah, basically, yeah. What
Yeah.
well, kind of like what had to be in place to make you decide to run?
So right, and for me, it was literally sitting down with my husband was my number one advocate, but sitting down with my daughters. I have two teenager, preteen, and a younger one. Sitting, getting my parents' blessings, getting blessings from other extended family, my in-laws, my siblings, because I knew this would be a family effort. I knew that I would have to rely on everyone. I couldn't have done it alone. So I got everyone's blessings. My mother was the only one who was hesitant to give me her blessing because she was worried. Just because it's not an easy path to take. But finally, I did get her blessing. But yes, so once everything, that was in place. And it's interesting, I have a friend who I would always call after speaking to, my mentors and family and everyone. And I would call her and be like, no one's telling me no. No one's telling me no. And I was searching for a no because I knew how difficult this would be and no one said no. So, so yeah, once I got everyone's, approval and blessings, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm doing it.
So if I had to sum it up really quickly, I would say two things would have to be in place, or how did I assemble my team would be, number one, you have to do the work. So hopefully the ladies that are listening right now have already been doing the work, but just in case you haven't, you have to do the work in your community. And once you do that, you're going to gain the respect of people that you think aren't even watching. People are paying attention. The streets are watching, okay? And so when you're doing the real work, it's going to, and you ask the question of, hey, I need help, or who can be on my team, or can you help me with this? People, because they've seen your consistency and delivering results and serving your community, they see your heart, they see your work ethic, they're going to want to be a part of it. That's what it sounds like happened with Sadaf, right? People just kept coming to her and volunteering because they had already seen her work, right? Hosanna had been doing the work, and that's why she was able to get people, because she had been doing the work. So that's one of the ways to assemble your team, and one of the things that must be in place. The other method for me is also prayer. And I say prayer, and I'm gonna stick by it, because I do believe that we need to use intuition, we need discernment, and we need to be in alignment spiritually, because ultimately public service politics, there's still, to me, a spiritual element to it, because it's about recognizing our interconnectedness, right? And it's about trying to fix things, because some people don't realize that we're all connected, and the way that we're doing public policy is harming certain people in the community because they don't recognize the humanity of someone else. So for me, it's prayer and doing the work, because the work will attract the people for you.
Thank you all so much for answering that question. And for our audience out there, I think from all three of our panelists, you know, what we really heard is just being involved, right? So even right now, your involvement with Ignite, your involvement here today, you know, listening to this panel, asking these questions, anything you're involved with, it all counts. Because as I said, people are always watching you and seeing what you're doing and what you're going to do next. All right, so quickly before we get into our last question and closing remarks, we have one more question from our audience. Hosanna, I want to throw this one to you because you said something earlier, which is basically like, I'm not a rich person running for office. So I think this will be right up your alley. And so the question from our audience is, how do you gather the financial means to run? And if you don't have that financial ability, what are some of the best strategies to get your ideas and voice out there?
Okay, I'll do this super quick. Yeah, I'm so broke. I'm so broke, y'all. I could not be running for office forever, right? To gather the financial means to run, something that is awful, but you got to do it. Call time. Call time is so awful, but we all do it. We got to sit there. We got to dial for dollars. You got to get people to believe in you, and you got people to give you money. It sucks. It sucks. It sucks. It sucks, but we got to do it. And the other thing that I would also mention in there is that, like, depending on your values, right, there's going to be certain groups or certain organizations that you're just going to be like, I'm not taking money from them, right? And that makes it a bit harder for you too if you're one of those folks. Like for me personally, I don't take money from real estate PACs. I don't take money from real estate developers. So it was hard to be like, some people are going to raise all that money like this, and I'm going to have to go like, hi, can I have $5? Hi, can I have $10? You got to do it really hard. So that's how you run for office. Build a team, build a process, get really good at it, and carve out a lot of time to do call time. And what are the best strategies to get your ideas and voices out there? You got to hit the streets. You got to knock on doors. You got to make phone calls. You got to write postcards. It is really hard and laborious, but it is also so heartwarming when you knock on someone's door and they're just like, no one's ever come to my door before. I'm so glad you're here. Yes, I will vote for you. You don't even have to tell me anything about yourself. I will vote for you. And you're just like, thank you. I'm going to go to the next door now. So call time, doors. That's how you do it.
Thank you so much. And so briefly, ladies, I want you each to take about a minute or so to quickly answer our last question here, which would basically is, what advice would you give to young women or young people who plan on running? And Sadaf, I want to start with you, and then we'll go to Naima, and we'll finish off with Hosanna.
Thank you, LaShawn. What I mentioned earlier is just do it. You will know in your heart that this is a path for you to do it. If there is something that you feel you can be a part of and needs fixing, go for it. Absolutely go for it. And like Naima said, like Hosanna's done, like Naima's done, like myself, get involved and find those answers. And if you're not finding those answers or those solutions, then do it. Just do it. That's what I'm going to say.
Thank you, Sadaf. So I'm going to bring us back to meditation and prayer, however you would like to call it. I would say before running for office or making the decision, or if you are already running, just make sure that I do believe in Kairos timing in politics as opposed to Chronos, right? Because anyone can run for office at any point, anybody, right? As long as they meet those minimum qualifications. But are you the right person for the job that you're running for at the time that you are thinking to run for? So my encouragement is, remember that running for office and being a public servant and elected official is about serving your community. So if you do believe that you are prepared and that you are the right person and the best person to serve in that role in that particular moment, then run. And just make sure that you're in alignment spiritually with yourself and whatever it is that you subscribe to, so that you have inner peace as you're doing this process.
Yeah, I would second what both Naima and Sadaf said. Like, do it, do it, do it. Really spend the time to figure out what your why is. And then once you do it, then this is so important. Once you do it at 100%, right? Like you're in it, you're already here, you're already doing it. It's already hard. It's going to continue to be hard. So, I think it was Elizabeth Warren was like, why are you running if you're not going to change something, right? Like you might as well just go, like just do it as hard as you can. So by the time you're done doing it, you can be like, I gave that my all. I have no regrets. Like I'm just gonna chill now. Like it's in God's hands. You know what I mean? Like I'm chilling. It's above me now. So yeah, just do it as hard as you can and don't let up.
Great. Thank you all so much. That concludes our candidate panel. I want to take a moment and again, just thank you so much. Sadaf, Hosanna, Naima, thank you all. You all are powerhouse women, powerhouse candidates. I want to personally thank you all for making the decision to run and just getting out there and being bold and taking that step. And being such an inspiration for everyone who's watching our panel. And just, letting young women and young people know, hey, you can do it. You're qualified. Just take the chance, get out there and do it. Thank you all so much for being a part of our panel. We appreciate you today and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.